Hello, everybody, and welcome to another adventure in history. It's the 4th of July, and I don't expect that I'll have a big crowd tonight because everybody's outside blowing stuff up. Well, many people are outside blowing stuff up. Some people might be blowing stuff up regardless of whether or not it has anything to do with the holiday. You know, that's just sort of what we do in America. We blow stuff up. What's up, Shimon Knight? Good to see you. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody is having a good one. Kyle is Spartacus. Happy Blow Stuff Up Day. Yeah. I'm Spartacus. Kyle, thank you so much for being the longest running Spartacus that I have on the record. Kyle has literally been subscribed since the very, very beginning. Kyle is Spartacus. Okay, well, there are a couple of other people that have been there since the very, very beginning, but Kyle is definitely one of the first, I think, 2 or 3 people that ever subscribed to the channel. Maybe the first person to subscribe to the channel. And that's crazy. You start thinking about like how long ago I started streaming, and it just starts kind of boggling the mind that I've been at this for more than 4 years now on something that kind of started as a lark because of COVID, where my students needed some way to get information and I felt like I could give it to them through the internet. But man, it's weird. It's weird. But Shimon Knight, good to see you. Silver Pills, good to see you. It's good catching up yesterday. Kyle, hope that things are going well in your world. Are you back home at this point, or are you still in the forests? Beautiful, beautiful setting, by the way. Some of that stuff that you posted. Kyle was doing some work up in the indoor parts of California. It's really pretty stuff. But this is Adventures in History, and we're going to talk some history tonight. And home back now. Okay, cool. Yeah. So I know that this is, again, probably not going to be the world's biggest crowd tonight. That's okay. I'm, I guess, doing my patriotic duty by trying to make the world smarter, and you make the people smarter and they make better decisions, and that makes the country better, right? That's at least what I'm working with. We'll continue under this delusion if it is such a delusion. But anyway, I hope that everybody is doing okay. And I just noticed that my camera has frozen. Boo? I don't know why we're booing. Is there something specific we are booing? For making people smarter. Oh, yeah. Perhaps that's actually unpatriotic. Given the atmosphere of our current world in the United States, maybe making people smarter is actually not what people think we should be doing, which is odd, but you know, potentially the way that a lot of people see it, which is, again, it just kind of blows my brain up. The anti-intellectualism movement. I mean, I get not liking people that are super big on like ivory tower kind of garbage. I'm not big on that either, but not just like the anti-learning things, anti-thinking. I prefer my opinions to be spoon-fed to me. Thanks. An informed citizenry is the backbone of it. Yeah, exactly. It's like Franklin stuff, right? If you show your crowd from the right angle, you can claim it's the biggest crowd. So huge. Yeah, it was a great crowd. 200,000 people showed up at the lawn. They could never been equaled. Biggest inauguration ever. You feel smarter for being here. There we go. There we go. It works, right? You get a little bit of osmosis, right? +1 intelligence on all rolls in Adventures in History chat. So, so we are going to be looking at a region of the world and a time period of this region when a lot of people really don't know what's going on. And I'll be honest, this is not my strongest historical period of time and region of time. I had to do some research and had to make sure that my dates in my organization and timeline were all correct. So I was doing some of that yesterday and hanging out on stream. We're being visited by a puppy. Hello, Kaylee. What you doing? You all want to see the puppy? Of course you want to see the puppy. You're here for puppy content. You're not here for human content, right? Hold on a second. Let me switch over here to puppy cam. There's the puppy. Hey, Claire, what's up? So it has been storming today, and normally she's not really the world's biggest fan of storms, but she actually did really well. So I was very proud of her for being a tough pupper. Oh, I'm going to get the paw. Oh yes, thank you. Thank you for the paw. She does this to show her affection. She likes to let me hold her arm. Such a brave puppy. That is correct. So brave. It's a good girl. The fireworks tonight will probably not be her friends. She historically does not like them very much. What are you doing? Just going to hang out here with me? I didn't bring a puppy bed in here for you. I'm sorry. You want to come and see me? No? Just going to hang out? Just going to give me big puppy eyes? Oh my goodness. All right. I think that might be enough puppy content. She's a mess. She's a good puppy. And as soon as I said that, she's up and is out of the... Yeah, she's going back up to, I guess, hang out with Brittany. Which is what she normally does. She normally sleeps during my stream. But, I mean, to be fair, she sleeps most of the time anyway. So... There's never enough puppy content. Okay, that's fair. You want a pupper? Your wife doesn't like them, so you have a cat and alpacas. Okay, well, I don't actually know the temperament of alpacas. They could be potentially dog-like, but I know that cats are a completely different thing, right? They are not very dog-like at all. So, I know that llamas are rude and territorial and angry, so maybe alpacas are sort of like that. I don't know. They might be sweeter. I know they're smaller. Your cat thinks he's a person. There we go. They're curious, timid, dumb animals. There we go. Okay, I could be down with that. KP comes in with Happy America Day. What's up, KP? Good to see you, man. All right. So, again, we're going to be talking about Eastern Africa, and we're going to sort of focus on this region right here for Trader. For the day. And there's a lot of stuff that happened during this sort of time period that we've been looking at historically. So if you've been around the streams of the last few months, we're looking at this period of time from like 1100 or so to about 1300. And this period of time in Africa is going to set up a lot of stuff that is going to kind of put down the I don't know, the foundation of how the next 600 years or so is going to go in Africa. We're going to see a lot of political shifting. We're going to see a lot of population shifting, and we're going to see a lot of government shifts and religion shifts. And those are going to be influential even all the way up until today. If we look at the modern map of this region, and we're looking at countries like Sudan, and Ethiopia, and Eritrea, and Somalia, there are still a lot of the same conflicts going on in this region today that went on back 700, 800, 900 years ago in this region. And a lot of those modern conflicts have to do directly with things that we're going to talk about tonight. And if you don't know anything about what's going on in modern day Eastern Africa, that's okay too, right? You don't have to know anything before coming in. I'm going to give you all the information that you need. But we're going to start talking about some of these kingdoms and some of these political organizations over here in Africa during this time period. And we're going to start with a group or a kingdom that is called Alodia. And I can show you this. Alodia. So what is up with this weird looking map? Well, this is sort of a map of Alodia at its height, and this is actually a little bit before our time period, most notably because the Aksumite Empire is still around. The Aksumite Empire is going to fall in 960 AD, and Alodia is going to hang around for a little bit longer than that, but this is sort of Alodia at its height. And you'll notice that we don't actually know necessarily everything about this particular territory. And this is going to be true of a lot of these groups that are here on the upper Nile. And remember that the Nile runs from here north. So the upper Nile is actually southerly in arrangement. They have a big capital here at Soba. And if you have been around on all of the previous streams, we've talked about Alodia before. But again, you don't necessarily have to know everything about what we covered in the past. Will this all be on the exam? I joke and say that there's not an exam. But what's really funny about that is when we made it to 100 streams in Adventures in History, I actually made an exam. I made a big PowerPoint that had a whole bunch of questions, and it had one question from every lesson that we had covered in the first 100 episodes. I may do that again for 200, but I don't know, maybe. It'll be another probably year or so before we get there. I've streamed less as time has gone on, and I've streamed a lot less this year than I did last year. And part of that is because I've traveled a lot more. And part of that is also because I've just had a lot of health stuff going on that has made me feel really weird. But anyway, we'll get there probably next year, and we might have another test. So, recently started King Leopold's Ghost about the Belgian Congo. Ooh, yeah, that's... that's a tough one. That would be a good viewer request episode. A brutal one, and one that's all mass murder and genocide happen, but one that I don't think a lot of people know about. That period of time in the 1800s during the scramble for Africa is it's rough stuff, man. Absolutely rough stuff. Shmonite says that he has a blast from the past. 70% of your coworkers are out this week with COVID. Wow. I know there are some new variants going around, but I didn't know that it was back up to that level of saturation. It's kind of crazy. But okay, what's up with Alodia, and why should we talk about them, and why are they cool? Well, Alodia during this time period is going to have a pretty good run for a little while. They're going to have a really big kingdom. They're going to have a very densely populated capital city at this place called Soba. They're going to have a lot of regional ties. They're going to be able to talk with a lot of people in the area, from Egypt up to the big Muslim powers in places like Mesopotamia and Saudi Arabia, and even all the way up into places like the Byzantine Empire. Because the really interesting thing about Alodia, if you were around, you'll remember this, but or perhaps you'll remember this. But if not, they were a Christian nation, and they traced their Christian heritage back through a very long line of Christian converts that had started, according to them, all the way back in the 1st century A.D. And Alodia was interesting because it also had a really big mix of people. It was a very polyethnic kingdom. You have native people that would have been related to the ancient Kushites. If you remember, or if you've ever heard of the Kushites that fought against the Egyptians quite extensively back in the BC time period, those are sort of the native people of this region. They also had Egyptian people. They had Arab people that had moved into the region during the 700s and 800s. And they also have different local ethnic groups that were either like Agal was a big one, Abyssinian, or various other groups that were sort of local to the area. So the Axumites had this big country to the south. Axum had conquered them a few times in the past, or occupied them a few times in the past. But when we're talking about our time period for tonight, specifically looking at like the 1100s and 1200s, they're going to be doing pretty well, and they're going to be expanding. And one of the guys that is pushing this is this dude. This dude's name is Moises Georgios, or basically Moses George. Just give us the questions and the answers to study. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know what you're talking about there, Silver Pills. Here's the question and the answer, and just make sure you get it right on the exam, right? But old Moses here is one of the more powerful leaders, and is going to oversee the combination of our country, Alodia, with its northern neighbor, which we've talked about it before as well, this place called Makuria. And you can see here that when we put this together, we end up with this really kind of long combination of territory. So this is Makuria and the territory that they controlled. It's mostly here along the Nile River basin, but that's actually the most fertile land in the region. So under Moses Georgios, if we're bringing in Alodia, which is all this territory down here, we're making a nice big chunk of territory and a lot of really good farmland that's going to be brought into our kingdom of Alodia. Now, what are we going to do with that? You do a whole bunch of cool stuff like trade. Now, trade coming out of Africa during this time period is really going to focus on sort of 3 bodies of water. One of those bodies of water is obviously the Nile River. There is still an enormous amount of trade moving on the Nile north and south during this period of time. The other big and very important body of water here, or one of the other ones, is the Red Sea. And then, of course, we have the Indian Ocean. Now, getting from Central Africa here to the Indian Ocean was a bit of a tough thing. You had to move stuff overland a lot. Now, there were some port cities that opened out over here. There's a really important port city right here called Zila, which we'll actually talk about again a little bit later on. There are easier ways to get to the Red Sea, and of course, most of the territory that our big new kingdom of Alodia, when it absorbs Makuria, would have is the Nile River. But everybody knows that trade makes money, and everybody knows that trade is conducive or based around moving stuff around. So the territory here in Egypt at this time period is being ruled by the Ayyubids. So the Ayyubids were the people that ended up being instrumental in big wars, especially like the Third Crusade. If you remember Salah ad-Din, he was one of the leaders of the Ayyubids. And as a sort of a way to kind of put this into perspective, one of the reasons why I like to talk about all these different eras contemporaneously is that you really get a bigger picture of what's actually going on here. So, yes, Saladin is over here fighting Philip II and Richard I, the people that we talked about on Tuesday, in the Crusade, but he was also sending armies up the Nile River down here to attack places like our kingdoms of Makuria and Alodia, because he needed their food to fund his armies. And all of this stuff is connected and is happening at the same time. And during this period, there are actually attempts made by some of these people down here to contact Christians in the Byzantine Empire or in Europe, to potentially form some sort of alliance where if you all are going to attack the Egyptians or the Ayyubids in Egypt, we can attack from the south if you attack from the north, and then we can get like this, pincher movement going on. Now, it never really comes to anything, but all of this is happening at the same time. And all of these leaders would have been at least passingly familiar. Desert vehicles and tanks. You're welcome. Thanks, Claire, so much for the corgi bits. As always, those are absolutely adorable. Because, again, none of this stuff is happening in a vacuum, right? All of these kingdoms are going and blowing at the same time. Now, what ends up happening because of this connection between the Christians in Alodia and the Christians up in Europe and in the Middle East is that the Ayyubids decide that they need to kind of go away. And the Ayyubids had been pushing on the borders of Makuria even before Alodia took them over, but that's really going to be one of the big things that starts ending the kingdom of Alodia, and it's going to pretty much fall completely apart by about the middle part of the 1300s. But this is going to be done in a very interesting sort of way. There is direct military conflict, and especially the big fortresses that are along the Nile. The Ayyubids are going to sweep in and take a lot of those big fortresses from Alodia and sort of beat them up and take that material. But one of the things that starts happening is the Arab and Muslim trade interests in the region are going to start bringing a lot more people in. So if you are over here in Arabia, you don't have what we might consider the world's best farmland. By Alodia, right? But if you can move right across the Red Sea and come over here, well, now we're talking, right? This is a way different area over here. I mean, we can just see purely by satellite imagery that this is going to be a better place for farming than over here. And at that time, the Sahara Desert was not nearly as big. So you would have had fertile territory all the way up into this region, which is just sort of a bloop hop over the Red Sea. Bayek Auditore. Is this Bayek? Perhaps Bayek Auditore? Okay. Pro tip, never argue with a dinosaur. You will get your ass kicked. I appreciate the puns, and you get the golf clap. Welcome, Bayek. I hope that you're having a good day or night or whatever your time zone is. Please feel free to participate in whatever level you feel comfortable. We do love puns here, so you will never go wrong with a good pun. Of course, as long as it's not something that's horribly offensive to racial identities or, groups of people, right? Just don't be a jerk and everybody will be okay. But the shifting population is going to be what sort of pulls Alodia apart from the inside. There are going to be big migrations of Egyptian and Arab people down into this region, and it's going to start displacing a lot of the native people. So as populations grow, of course, you have to move into places that have more ability to produce food, And when you have the consequence of producing more money from trade by moving into this region, this is going to attract yet even more people, right? But this movement of people and this shift is also going to bring with it a really big religious shift, because again, this region had for a very, very long period of time been overwhelmingly Christian. Now, there were Jewish people and there was a minority of Muslim people in the region, but with this new migration being almost completely Muslim, this is going to cause a lot of religious tension, and you're going to see evidence of places, especially in the northern part of Alodia, where churches are going to be targeted for destruction, and you're also going to see a slow but steady abandonment of sites, moving from a sort of northerly to southerly direction. And by the time we get to around the 1100s, they're even going to end up abandoning their capital at Soba, and they're going to move to a smaller city that's a little bit further away from what we might call the front line. And then by the 1300s, you don't even really see any kind of reference. Wow. I'm Spartacus. Silver Pills. Thank you for being Spartacus for 6 months in advance. That's crazy, man. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. You're from Uganda. Oh, awesome. I don't understand. Racial identities. Does that mean I can't identify as white? I mean, if you're talking about, like, do we get to change our racial identity? That's an interesting question that actually has a lot of sociological implications. If you look at this from the perspective of a lot of sociologists, race, as we understand it today, is a social construct. Now, I don't know if I completely agree with this myself. I'm not giving you my personal opinion. I'm just trying to explain this from the angle of a sociologist that might believe this. But if race is a purely socially constructed element or a social fact, can you then change your racial identity? And that's an interesting question. Transracial identities have already become somewhat well known. A great example of that in the United States is a lady named Rachel Dolezal, who was born and identified white all the way up into the point where she was in college, and then decided that she just felt more comfortable identifying as black. So she began to style her hair differently and wore different clothes, and majored in African American studies, and joined the local group of the NAACP, which is a group in the United States that focuses on racial disparities and racial justice. Specifically, it was formed in the early 1900s by people that were pushing back against racial segregation in the United States. And she married a black man and presented herself as black for a very long time, until she was outed by her parents on the internet. And at that point, when asked, Rachel, why did you do this? Her answer is, I identify as black. So this brings up a whole slew of questions that might be fun to discuss, but perhaps not necessarily the time for it at the moment. I do teach sociology, so I know a lot about this stuff, and this is actually material that I cover in my sociology class, and it is a very fascinating topic. Personally, I'm not 100% certain that the social response to a transracial identity is one that is going to be easily supported, mostly because there is a lot of consternation between people about what qualifies as race. And I think that anybody that wants to adopt transracial identity has the freedom to do so. You can believe about yourself whatever you want to. I can't tell you no. But what I would tell you is that it's going to be very difficult for you, if you are feeling that way, to convince other people in society and society at large to respect that decision and treat you accordingly. Whether or not that's good or bad is not something that I'm saying. I'm not trying to pass a moral judgment here. It's not my place to pose moral judgments like that. But it's an interesting situation. And there have been scholarly papers posted about this. One of the more famous, I guess perhaps infamous papers about this would be from a woman who has a PhD in philosophy that wrote a paper that basically said, if gender is a social construct and as a society we're going to be willing to allow people to change their gender and respect that choice, if race is also a social construct, then we must also allow people to change their race and respect that as a choice. It's an interesting paper. It caused a lot of stir, as you might expect. But I mean, tangents are a great thing, and I appreciate that. And I also recognize that there might have been an element of a joke in the question. But one of my things, I guess, is to sort of take questions that might be jokey and actually try my best to answer them academically or constructively, perhaps. But anyway, I've deeply considered doing a sociology stream here and there, and that would 100% be something that we could talk about to more depth. But for the moment, we can sort of tangent back into our discussion here about Alodia. And as a way to sort of dovetail this into what we were actually just talking about, one of the ways that we know that the population of Alodia was shifting isn't necessarily because of big cultural changes where it dramatically looks like, we have different physical culture. Captain Price. Welcome to the adventure, and thank you so much for that follow. Hope you're having a good one. Feel free to participate at whatever level you'd like. One of the ways that we know that this cultural shift is happening in the area is that we start noticing different names on inscriptions. And instead of names that are more closely associated with the ethnic identities that would have been in the region prior to the migration of people, we start seeing a lot more names that have Arabic influence. So we don't see this dramatic shift in like they're building their houses differently or they're using different types of pottery or something like that. But we can note that there are differences in the population based on just the way that they name themselves, right? So that's an interesting little thing here. But again, by the time we get to the middle-ish 1300s, Alodia is pretty much going to go away. And there are going to be a lot of local nobility, people that are going to make some claims to some territory here. You're going to see some local city-state sort of operation in this region. But there's going to be kind of a void here that needs to be occupied. Now, we'll talk about the people that actually get around to doing that in just a bit, but we do need to talk a little bit about some other people that are in the area, most specifically right around here. And this is a region that brings us to our pun title for the night. This region is called the Dahlak Archipelago, and if we look at it just here on the map, you can see that there are a lot of islands. Depending on how many islands you want to count, it's somewhere between 100 and 200 different islands, but all of these are going to have some level of settlement on them. The big island here of Dahlak Keber is going to be the largest and most populated island, and the reason this particular archipelago is going to be important is, as you might expect, trade. It's in the Red Sea. It sits directly in the path of people that are moving goods from this region to this region. And as a reminder, the Silk Road still exists during this period of time. And in many ways, it's more functional than it ever was in what we might call classical antiquity, because it had a really huge added Indian Ocean influence. So there was a ton of trade moving around here And one of the most important corridors that led from places like India and Southeast Asia to Europe was, boom, right up here through the Red Sea. And if we are the Dahlak archipelago and we're sitting right here, this is a great place to be located, because you are then basically the gatekeepers. And this is going to be a really interesting region for a few different reasons. First off, this is one of the first areas in Africa that gets settled by Arab peoples. And they're going to come over fairly early on in the 600s, and they're going to basically take over these islands in the early 700s, early and mid 700s, under the Umayyad dynasty. So the Umayyad Caliphate is very, very early in Muslim history. This is the group of people that took over right after Muhammad and his family. So we're not talking, way into Islamic history. We're talking pretty early on. Now, the islands themselves had bounced back around in between a whole bunch of different people that claimed them. Some people that were Muslim said that they belonged up here to, the Arabian tribes. Some people said that that we're over here in what is modern day Yemen. If we put the borders back on, you can see this is the modern day country of Yemen. There were some Yemeni groups, especially the Ziyadid and the Zabidi, that are going to claim part of these islands as their own. But by the time we get to the early 1000s, there are going to be movements within the Dahlak archipelago to establish themselves as independent, because if there's this much money moving around, you want to be able to keep as much of it as possible, right? Perhaps this is appropriate for us discussing Independence Day on Independence Day. But the idea here is that they wanted to control themselves. They wanted to be independent free agents. And this is going to bring us to the creation of a country or a territory that's called the Sultanate of Dahlak, which is going to be based on the Dahlak archipelago. Now, this is going to happen under a guy named El Mubarak, and El Mubarak is a figure that we don't really know too much about. Now, here's the kicker. If you go to, let's say, Britannica or Wikipedia or something like that, you might find a lot of information that's written about El Mubarak, the guy that started the independent Sultanate of Dahlak. But it's a lot of legendary stuff. And this is a trap that a lot of people fall into because we have to balance very carefully here the authenticity that can exist within an oral record and the fact that it's an oral record, right? If you all have been around me long enough, or if you've been around Stream long enough, you'll know that I have no problem admitting that oral records and oral histories can contain within them a lot of truth. And I am absolutely not a person that says we should just discredit them out of hand. However, we also have to be very critical of these. For example, if we look at the stories that come from the reign of El Mubarak, what do they tell us about him? Well, they tell us a lot of stuff about how he's justifying his rule, about how he's related to these important people, about how his family is very important and tied into all the big trade networks. And this might be very well true, but could this also just be justification for being the guy that kind of pushes out the outsiders, right? We don't really know, and we can't really know for certain. But we know that sometime around the end of the 1000s, at the beginning of the 1100s, the Sultanate of Dahlak is going to become independent. Now, what does that mean? Well, they're going to be able to keep all of their own money, and this is going to make them fabulously wealthy. And they're going to become the monopolizers of a lot of this trade, especially trade coming out of our region here in Eastern Africa. Because, again, It's all about getting stuff to the water. You don't want to have to lug stuff across the land. You want to get it to the water where you can put it on a ship where you can move it faster and much easier. So the Sultanate of Dahlak is going to be the people that you bring stuff to. They're going to have contacts here within Africa, but they're also going to start making direct contacts with people all the way over here in India, all around the Arabian Peninsula, over here into Persia, even up into the regions that are today Egypt and Jordan on this side of the Red Sea. So these people have contacts everywhere, and they're going to become very good at sailing. They're going to have a lot of really good contacts. They're going to have a lot of really good business people that are going to be able to cut these deals and balance the books in positive ways where everybody gets to make a little bit of money, but they get to make the most money, right? You got to have good people that can make the good deals, right? There's an art, if you will, to a deal. Of course, if you're going to write a book about the art of a deal, you get somebody else to write it, and then you throw in a couple of personal anecdotes and say that you wrote it, only to find out that you actually didn't write any of it. But that's sort of how you work it, right? It's just sort of how it goes. Bit of a joke. I don't know if anybody's catching that. It's okay if you didn't. So their golden age is going to be from around 1100 to around 1300. So this time period that we're talking about right now is going to be at the height of their civilization. Now, I would absolutely love to show you a whole bunch of pictures from their buildings and their mosques and their fabulous storehouses of wealth, but I can't. And there's a reason for that. These particular islands are incredibly strategically located. And over the course of time, a lot of people have taken these islands over and taken them over again and taken them over again. And what this has unfortunately done for a lot of the history of this area is that it's gone. And I can show you some stuff that came from the Dahlak archipelago. Things like these. These are a funeral stela. So these are basically gravestones or markers that are erected upon the death of individuals. These are stela of two of the sultans of Dahlak. And, I mean, it's beautiful stuff, right? This art design here where you have this symmetrical layout and all of this beautiful calligraphy that's carved in relief. This is really, really, really cool stuff. And it shows a very high level of artistic skill, and it shows a very high level of centralized government, because to develop artisans like this, you have to be able to pay people to do nothing but art. You can't just crack open a chisel and make one of these in an afternoon with no practice, right? So how do you do that? Well, you have to have a stable government that's got enough money, that has excess money, so that you can have people that don't do anything but art, right? And it's interesting that I can show you these, but it's also fairly, perhaps, fitting or expected that you cannot go to the Dahlak archipelago and see these. If you want to see these particular grave stela, you have to go to Britain, because these are in the British Museum. Because the British took over this region during the later periods of time when they're expanding in Africa and India. And if you've got a big fleet and you're moving people back and forth between the Mediterranean and Europe and India, you want these islands. So they were British for a while. Finders keepers? Yeah, I hear you, DCI Banks. But unfortunately, you can't see a lot of their remains. There are a couple of walls. Like if you Google Sultanate of Dahlak, you can see a couple of places where there might be like a single arched doorway that's left, or maybe a corner piece of some walls. You can find some of the remains of the necropolis of the Sultanate of Dahlak, where they buried all the dead people. But you're not going to find a lot of stuff left there. And it's really, really unfortunate. Our museums are full of people looking at their own stuff. Yep. It's true. So Sultan of Dahlak, really cool stuff, and we will probably mention them again at some point in the future. For the moment, let us move to a group called the Zagwe Dynasty. And you're like, oh, that sounds great. I dig them. Anyway, so if we're looking at the map, this is what we got. It's not a big territory. Well, this is actually early in the Zagwe Dynasty. Those British and their insatiable lust for souvenirs, right? Bring me something back. Again, here we have the Red Sea. We've got one of the branches of the Nile coming down this way, and then we have this little pocket of territory here that becomes the protectorate or the kingdom of the Zagwe Dynasty. Now, who are these people and where do they come from? If you remember earlier, I mentioned the Aksum Empire, or the Aksumite Empire. The last time we talked about Aksum, we talked about their collapse. There was a lady named Gudit, or Judith, that showed up and killed the last of the Aksumite kings, and then spent 40 years from 960 to 1000 ruling the territory on her own. At the end of that, this is where the Zagwe are going to come in. Now, Zagwe was a different group of people. They were a group of ethnic... their ethnic identity was called Agal. And they were not necessarily the same people that were running a lot of the Aksumite Empire. They definitely weren't the same. Well, I can't say definitely. They most likely were not the same as this Gudit lady. But they're going to take over as rulers after the chaos of Gudit goes away. They're going to try really, really hard to justify themselves, though. And this gets back to a little bit of the stuff that I was talking about with the guy El Mubarak, who's supposedly the founder of the Sultan of Dahlak. They start saying a lot of stuff about themselves. And they're going to try to justify their rule by doing a lot of the stuff the same way that the Aksumites did. So they start naming themselves the right way. They convert to Christianity. They're going to establish a government style that was basically the same as the Aksumite Empire. They're going to claim relationship to two really big figures way back in Jewish history, Moses and Aaron. So these are the people, that led the Israelites out of Egypt. The first priest of the temple was Aaron. This is Moses' brother. And the people that are leading the Zagwe dynasty are going to say, look, we have this storied history that goes all the way back to this super far back in time person that was chosen by God to lead, so we're also chosen by God to lead. There's no way that they could really make this claim constructively, right? They're going to start marrying into the old remnants of the Aksumite royal family, so they're really just sort of doubling down on, hey, we're just as cool as the Aksumites, and we're Christian like the Aksumites, so we should be able to rule like the Aksumites, and everybody should just get behind us and be cool with that. Your brain keeps hearing Dahlak and starts singing Welcome to Dahlak song from Shrek. That's fair. I could see that. If we're actually asking the question, though, where did the Zagwe dynasty come from? Who were they? What were they originally? We really don't know very much about them. We don't have a lot of written or historical records from this time period. The records that we do have are very confusing. And one of the reasons that they're confusing is because of the way that they named themselves. So they end up with 3 different names. First, you had a personal name, and this is like, the name that you would get from your parents. And then you would have a Christian name, and your Christian name is the one that you would get when you joined the church, right? So this is like, if you're familiar with Catholic tradition, this is like your confirmation name, right? And if you are a king, you take a regnal name, right? So some of these leaders identify themselves with 3 different names, and you'll see people writing histories later on trying to explain all of these people, and they'll say stuff like, oh yeah, King Jimmy, and we're like, okay, wait a second, time out. Is that his regnal name? Is that his personal name? Or is that his Christian name? And you can sort of interpret some of this based on what they're talking about, right? Like if it's talking about him being baptized, it might be referring to his Christian name. If it's talking about something that he did as a king, sure. But other times it's really, really difficult to say because they might use either of these names to refer to the same person, and you'll see them inscribe these things somewhat randomly and without a convention. So if I build something, I might put Shane on the building, but my first name isn't Shane. I go by my middle name. So sometimes I might go, oh, I need to make this look official, so I'll put my first name on there. It doesn't really matter why I'm doing this, except for that it screws up archaeologists and textual historians and critics later on. And we really don't know very much about these people because of how confusing their record system is. Also, their record system is written almost exclusively after by the later dynasties that are going to take over the region, and the later people hate their guts. So, Is Zagwe related to Zagnut? No, but I remember as I was prepping this, the word Zagnut came into my head a lot. There's not a lot of Zag in English, so all of that stuff is going to eventually run together, right? Well, okay, so this brings us to what are they doing and what's up with them and why are they cool? Well, we do know where their capital was. Their capital was at this place called Adifa, and it was a really big city. It had a very big population for the time, and especially for the region. And they have a very organized Christian faith, but again, they're still fairly ethnic and still fairly multiple religious identities. Now, again, Christianity is obviously the biggest one, but you do see Jewish people, and you do again see some Muslim people in the area. But there's a particular guy that I'd like to talk about, and that is this guy. So this is Gebre Meskel Lalibela. And again, 3 names. So Gebre is Gabriel, right? Which is probably his Christian name. Meskel is probably his given name, and Lalibela is his regnal name. Horse not chonky enough. Yeah, this is definitely not chonky horse. You need to get some more chonk on that horse, right? But this guy's really cool. Very big patron of Christianity. And when he takes over, he's going to oversee a lot of Christian patronage. This is potentially because he's also going to make a lot of money off of things like trade, but he's going to be one of the guys that really starts building up the capital. And what's really, really cool about this particular guy's chosen concept of how to build up the capital is the types of buildings that he chose to use. And Lalibela, I could probably put him up here as a note. Lalibela is going to oversee the construction of a lot of really cool churches. And the churches are rather unique because of how they're built. This is one of the biggest ones, and it's called Bete Madani Alem. And today we see brick pillars, but it's mostly to hold up the existing structure. This church was cut directly out of the bedrock. So you can see ground level up here in the back corner, and you can see the wall where they excavated all of this stone. And they cut this entire church out of the bedrock. It's one single piece of rock. What up, Tad? And this is just, it's fascinating stuff. Now, we've seen stuff happen like this in central India before, and there might be some influence there because this region does have at least some trade contact with India. I wouldn't say that it necessarily is directly because of that, but that's not the only one. if we go over here, we'll do some Google Earthing. And I can show you, they're called the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela. Oh, by the way, Lalibela becomes such a powerful and important king that they literally change the name of the city to his regnal name. So we can pop down and look at a lot of these. So this is inside one. And again, a church is just sort of cut directly out of the rock. You can see how big a lot of these are as well. There are about 7 or 8 of these, and they are in varying states of coolness. This is one of the ones that's a little bit less ornate, but still pretty cool. Again, we're dug well deep into the ground to make all of this stuff. And you can still go see this today, by the way. This is one of the more popular tourist locations in Ethiopia. What's up, Sohn? I feel like States of Coolness should be the title of my history book. That is a lot of effort, Junk Collector. It is. But the thing about the way that this works is if you are doing all of this effort, look at how much you love God, right? If you have the money and the power to, get hundreds of people out to dig around all of this stuff, how much does that mean that you love Jesus, right? Look at how much effort and money and time that I'm putting into this. Now, to be fair, Lalibela does not make all of these. He just makes some of these. And this kind of becomes a standard go-to tradition for later Zagwe rulers as well. But we're building cool little things over here on the side. Like we're not even just focusing on building the church, which again, it's a single piece of rock. That's freaking cool. But also we're doing stuff like carving decorations into the region around it, right? Just really, really cool. Are these those underground churches you heard about? Maybe. There are other underground churches. These specific ones are in Ethiopia. There are others in other countries. Specifically, there's one called Derinkuyu, which is in Turkey. That is a really big underground church structure that I've been to. And I can show you pictures of if you were interested. I just figured before video games, I had a lot of time to carve a mountain into a church with a spoon. They didn't have Instagram's endless doom scroll of cat videos, right? So, you still have to pay people, though, right? You still have to pay people to get out and do the work. And this, again, the reason I share this, Lalibela is a very powerful king and has the spare money to put forward for the manpower to get this all done, right? We call those cults. Depends on the reference of underground. Are we talking about like literally underground? Or are we talking about underground in a metaphorical way where it's sort of hidden or, mystical or spooky, right? Anyway, so there's some cool stuff going on here in the Zagwe dynasty. And no, literal. Well, I mean, let me see. Well, no, that's a big tangent. I guess if somebody, I don't even have the adventure hat by me. I guess I left it up front. Well, I was doing yard work earlier in the week, and I guess I left the adventure hat in the other room. I guess we can do some free adventure hatting. Just a second. Let me pull up the folder in question. Okay, so this is a site in Turkey, and this is the church above ground. But if you go underground, oh, thank you. My wife has lovingly brought me the adventure hat, which I guess I can now put on. But you can't even see it because I'm sharing the picture. So I'm wearing the adventure hat now. And we'll throw some hats in. You know, why not? Why not? I feel generous, right? Back to the pictures. Anyway, there are underground churches here. Let me get my pictures straight. This is one. So you go into this really big tunnel system, and this is pretty far underground. We were probably 30 or 40 feet underground, so what is that? 10-ish meters? That's not right. 6 feet is 2 meters-ish. 6 times... Yeah, that's about right. But these tunnels were carved out because this part of Turkey... this is, by the way, in a region of Turkey called Cappadocia. I'm sorry, Kilikia. And they had air holes, and, you know... but, I mean, it's a church. It's got columns. It has a niche. Pretty cool stuff. I dig caves. Stairwell. Okay, so this is actually at Maddie. We're adventure hatting. We're actually in Turkey right now. There was this air vent, and there was this circle of light. We came around the middle of the day to get out of the heat, and so this circle of light was perfectly on the ground. And I gave my camera to my friend, and I said, "You have to take a picture of me, because this is side quest Shane, who's standing in a pool of light that is waving at you, saying, 'Hey, I have a quest.'" And it's one of those quests where you have to escort a super annoying character around, and every 5 seconds he wants to stop and look at something, so it's really, really, really slow. And it's just super annoying. So anyway, this is side quest Shane. But anyway, this place would have had probably enough room for a couple thousand people down in it. And they had these really cool doorways where this big stone right here could have been rolled in front of this doorway as a way to block it off so that nobody could get in, to keep people from being able to just wander in your secret hideaway. And this, by the way, again, is under the church that I showed you at the beginning here. So you have to kind of go into this church and then kind of go down a passageway to get into the stuff that's underground. It's pretty cool, though. Walmart greeter Shane. Hey, I've got a quest. Hey, I've got a quest. And Maddie's like, "I'm not doing your stupid quest. Shut up." Also, Maddie, hey, good to see you. No, I don't actually dig caves with a shovel, but I appreciate the attempt at puns there. You heard Africa had really old churches that were in the ground a while back. Yeah, so this is probably what they were talking about. These are the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, and you can Google the name there, and if you want to, you can throw that into Google Earth and zoom in and look at all the photos. There are a lot of these churches. There are, again, 7 or 8 in this one complex, and then there are a couple of others that are sort of scattered out around. But Darren QU, again, is in Turkey. It's in this region right over here in Turkey. And that was made during a period of time where the population was under a lot of threat from Arab expansion and Muslim expansion, and the Christians felt very, very threatened and built these big underground cities. But that's happening around the same time, actually, as what we're talking about here, but not directly related. So there was a free adventure hat for you. Anyway, Lalibela is a pretty cool guy, has a fairly well-established reign. We know mostly about when his years were. So he's like late 1100s, early 1200s. And we know that he's got a fairly good foreign policy. We have connections where he's talking with other people in the region. One of the things that happens under his rule is an arrangement between him and Saladin that allows Ethiopians to make pilgrimages to the Holy Land. This is something that had been, questionable under a lot of the tumult that was going on because of the Second and Third Crusades, and that had put a lot of damper on people being able to travel to holy places. But we see Saladin making arrangements specifically for Ethiopians, and that's the word that they use up there, but they're referring to the Zagwe dynasty, specifically here to the rule of Lalibela. So, pretty cool guy, does a lot of cool stuff, but unfortunately, he doesn't stay around forever. I keep seeing people that say Africans aren't Christians historically, and I'm like, Africa is in the Bible. There are prominent people in the Bible from African areas. Yeah, exactly, right? Africa's all in the Bible. Lots of people from the Bible from Africa. Specifically here, and pertinent to our discussion, would be the Ethiopian eunuch story, where the disciple Andrew is riding down the road, and he meets, or walking down the road, and coming down the road with him is an Ethiopian eunuch from the court of the rulers in Ethiopia, and he's reading one of the scrolls from the Jewish scripture, and they have a conversation, and this guy gets converted to Christianity and gets baptized and then goes back to Ethiopia. That particular story is actually used by a lot of these people, including people like the Zagwe dynasty, to justify their relationship to the Christian church. And if we're being just historical, the Aksumite Empire converted to Christianity way before a lot of other places did. They were more Christian than Rome for a while. There's more Africa in the Bible than there is Europe. That's a toughie. I'd have to do math. There's a substantial amount of Africa in the Bible. But there's also Greece and a lot of the islands in the Mediterranean that are currently Greek. So do we count that? Yeah, probably. And then if we're talking about especially stuff in the Christian New Testament, there's a lot of European stuff there. Letters written to Hellenic churches, letters written to Rome, traveling. I don't know. I've never actually put it to a percentage, but there's a lot of stuff in Africa in the Bible. And anybody that says, oh, there's no Africa in the Bible, they're just not reading it the right way, right? Ethiopia was evangelized before Spain. Exactly, KP. Exactly, right? Like, their historical tradition of Christianity is older than a lot of the other churches that claim some sort of, historical reference to Christianity. So, yeah, you can't just skip Africa. But that actually means that the reason I wanted to talk about this is valid, because I want to talk about this part of Africa, and I wanted to spend a stream on this part of Africa, not just because it's cool and worth talking about, but because a lot of people don't talk about Africa at all. And one of the biggest gaps in most world civ or Western civ curriculas is African history. I try to fit as much of it as I can when I teach World Civ 1 and 2, but just to be clear, it's hard to fit all of this stuff in that I'd want to talk about because there are certain things that I must talk about. I have to be aware that students that take my classes will go on to take other classes, and there is a certain amount of expectation that they will know certain things. So I am free to make up my own curriculum, but I am aware that when I teach this stuff, other people will look at their schedule or their transcript and go, oh, you've had this, so you need to know these things, right? Unfortunate, the Bible has no North American representation. I was hoping the series wouldn't get canceled before that arc. Well, Tad, boy, do I have a great story for you. It's called The Book of Mormon and Jesus and his adventures with what is the actual title of the book? The Book of Mormon and Jesus's discussions with the Latter-day Saints. If you read the Book of Mormon, it's all about Jesus after the resurrection going to North America and coming into contact with a whole bunch of civilizations that are not archaeologically provable, but converting people there and writing all of this down on golden plates that were then discovered by Joseph Smith. So there you go. There's the... it's kind of like the Dragon Ball GT, where it's not really written by the same people, but it's in the same story that continues it in another element, right? No Africa in the Bible. What are they talking about? Have they ever heard of Moses? Yeah, that's true. Or Jesus, who was a refugee to Egypt? Exactly, right? Exactly. They do a little, but it's like all people in Africa, like it's one neighborhood. Yeah. That's another truth statement, or that leads us to another true statement about the way that history tends to treat Africa, especially American history. You say Africa, and that's supposed to mean everybody there. And it doesn't take into account that Africa is the most ethnically diverse continent on Earth, right? It doesn't take into account that Africa has literally the longest human history on Earth. That's where we got these things, right? That's where we first had these show up. We all came from there to begin with, so we've been, African by heritage for the last 300,000 years. But anyway, I don't think I need to tell you all this, but maybe I do. I don't know. These days, I'm pretty convinced most of the Baptists I've met never got past the Old Testament and learned to follow about this Jesus fellow. That's fairly true. That's fairly true. What a comparison. The dude who coined "What Would Jesus Do" was a self-avowed Christian socialist who denounced so much about capitalism and inequality and racism and bigotry. Interesting. Jesus wasn't white. Me, yeah, and. Yeah, Jesus was Semitic. He was a Jewish guy. Okay. Are we supposed to get upset about this? Historically speaking, he was a Semitic guy. His mom was Jewish from the Jewish land and had Jewish heritage. And if we're supposed to trust the genealogy that's given by the person who's attributed as the Gospel of Matthew, that traces her lineage all the way back to King David, she's really Jewish. So she's a Semite. And if Jesus's human part comes from Mary, guess what? He looks Semitic. He ain't white. He's brownish, right? He's olive complected, dark hair, dark eyes. Just the way it goes. The Book of Mormon is an excellent musical. Claire, I've never actually seen that before. I've been told that it was funny, but I've never actually seen it. Would it be offensive to convince Nogre to dress up as Jesus for Halloween? Viber, that's a great question. I don't know. Probably not. But I don't know. I guess the intent behind the action would be important here. Like, are you trying to do it to purposefully be offensive or to purposefully make someone offended? Then probably erring towards, yeah, it'd be offensive. And I feel like if we have to ask, the answer might be yes, but I don't know. Like, I think if Nogur was super interested in dressing up like Jesus, and did so in a way that was not supposed to be super offensive and wanted to try to make a point about something, people might take offense to it, but I don't know if it would necessarily be offensive. But there's the question of, is it offensive because it is actually offensive, or is it offensive because someone takes offense to it? And that's a whole sociological rabbit hole that I don't know if we have time to unpack tonight. The motivation that I can think of is so many hilarious situations where the punchline is, I'm Jewish. Yeah, I mean, I knew where you were going, right? And I saw that coming around the bend, but like, I don't know, man. I don't know. Let me kill that photo and let's get back over here to what we were talking about. Okay, so let's just take a moment, and for a brief moment in time, if we're just looking at the northern horn of Africa, about 1200 AD, we have all these cool kingdoms going on at the same time. We've talked about these three, and we have not talked about these two yet. We will in just a moment, but here we have Alodia and the Sultanate of Dahlak and the Zagwe Kingdom. And this one's a little bit larger because at this point they had taken over a bit more territory. But we need to introduce a new player, and that is the Solomonic dynasty of Ethiopia, or some people want to refer to them as Abyssinians. Abyssinian is a bit of it's an exonym. An exonym is a word that is used by people outside of a group to refer to the group. So if you were to go to Ethiopia at this time period and ask any of the people inside of the Solomonic dynasty, are you Abyssinian? They would probably say no. They might not even understand what the word you're using is, right? So probably not actually Abyssinian, and be careful when we're using that word here. But the Solomonic dynasty is a group that we can talk about. And this is a group that is going to kick out the Zagwe dynasty. And they do so under a guy named Ikwono Amlak. And I guess I should probably put his name up here. Ikwono Amlak. I don't know if I can show you a picture of this guy. I can show you these two guys. And I can tell you that this church that we're looking at was built by people under the direction of Ikwono Amlak, and that these might be pictures of him, but I can't say so. These could also just be saints or other people. And you're like, look, was he white? No, this is just the way that they painted people at the time. If you Google this guy's name, you can find pictures of him, but they're not pictures of him from his time period. They're pictures of him from much later that are almost certainly not his actual likeness. So I don't think I can actually show you a picture of this guy. I would love to, but I can't. But I can tell you who he is and what his deal was. So first off, he was a minor noble in the southern part of the Zagwe dynasty, down around this other area that was called Shewa. And if we go back to our map here, that is this region. So this kind of blurry area between these two zones is probably where Ikwono Amlak came from. Now, here's the story. So if we go back to the fall of the Aksumite Empire, Queen Gudit comes in and kills everybody and takes over and wrecks the world and destroys a bunch of stuff. The story is that the child of the last king was secreted away to the south out of her clutches and raised in secret. And as generations passed, the lineage was unbroken from the Aksumite, the last Aksumite king, to Ikwono Amlak. And as he is growing into his position, he's going to make the claim that he's actually the legitimate ruler of Ethiopia. Now, the Zagwe dynasty has been ruling Ethiopia at this point for a couple hundred years, and they're not necessarily super excited to just let it go. But there's some changes happening in the world right now, right? And again, these changes are going to be important changes. And some of the stuff that's happening inside of Ethiopia during this period of time is a sort of a realignment of authority and power. And you're going to start seeing church members and clergy members and religious figures having more political power. And it just so happens that Ikwono Amlak is related to a lot of the big and important religious leaders inside of Ethiopia at the time. He's specifically related to two of these really big abbots. An abbot is a person that runs a monastery. And he's going to use this religious power and his claim to religious authority through the Aksumite leadership all the way back to King Solomon, which is where we get Solomonic dynasty, as a reason to select him as the new leader. And this is going to work. And the last of the Zagwe dynasts is expelled and kicked out. And in 1270, Ikwono Amlak is going to set up himself a new dynasty. And what's interesting here is that he's also an anagram of Yo Alumni KK. Interesting. All right. I would never have made that point, but I guess it is a valid one. Pertinent, questionable. Valid, yes. Anyway, one of the things that is a big deal here for this particular dynasty is that this is the dynasty that will continue to rule Ethiopia all the way up through the 1900s. And if you are familiar with any of the Ethiopian stuff that happened in the 1800s between them and Italy, or the 1900s when they were one of only two independent nations in Africa, or if you've ever heard of a very, very famous guy named Haile Selassie. This is the dynasty that we're talking about. Haile Selassie was the last of the Solomonic dynasts to live and rule in Ethiopia. And his dynasty goes all the way back to this guy that took over in 1270 AD. So, again, we're seeing stuff, right? These are the first of the dominoes that are going to fall that lead to things that have happened later on. So just to kind of put all of this into perspective, if you like Bob Marley music, you might not have had Bob Marley music without Ikwono Amlak. So we would not have known who shot the deputy. We would still not know who shot the sheriff, but we would not know who shot the deputy. So you can thank Ikwono Amlak for that. Wait, other way around. We would not know who shot the sheriff, but we would still not know who shot the deputy. It would have been funnier if it actually worked. Haile Selassie represents Ethiopia in the Civ games. There we go, right? Well, his dynasty started with this guy. Now, what does he do? How does it work, right? If we're talking about what do you do if you're taking over, if you are the new guy, and if you're the new one that's going to make yourself known as a good old patron of God and a good old guy that's going to rule the country, well, you build yourself a cool church. And he builds this one. This is called Geneta Mariam. And again, it's one of these carved out of the bedrock churches. This one's a little bit outside of the larger group. It's not quite as big as some of the other ones, but it's still pretty cool. Again, I'm just fascinated by the fact that they designed all of this as they were going, right? So for a while, the only part of this that was a thing was this roof line with these crosses carved on them, right? And all of this was just like a block of stone. You'd live in that? I mean, that's pretty cool. It's got a nice view, right? Probably earthquake proof. But anyway, pretty cool stuff. Big dude, this guy. Anyway, after he sets up his dynasty, this is going to continue, and his followers and successors are going to do quite a bit of stuff. They're going to begin to expand their territory. They're going to build a much larger army, and they're going to start taking over some of the local kingdoms. And if we go back to our map here, I told you we would mention this group, Dahlak. And we will. This was an independent kingdom, and it's a little bit of an interesting kingdom. A lot of people refer to these, to the people of Dahlak as the pagans of Dahlak, because it does seem like they were neither Christians nor Muslims at various points in time, that they still practice some of the native polytheistic religions or indigenous polytheistic religions. But anyway, they're going to get conquered. Now, they had been fairly powerful prior to the Solomonic dynasty. They had fought with the Zagwe kingdom a couple of times and managed to beat them a couple of times. But by the time we get to the Solomonic dynasty showing up, these guys are basically a bump in the road. And they're going to take out Dahlak by the early 1300s, and they're going to start dominating trade. And when you get further into the central part of Africa, what you're also going to start getting into are the mining things, right? Stuff like gold and stuff like jewels. And these are things that are going to make you a ton of money, right? Like, you can literally make money out of gold, right? It's a lovely little Ganetaway. We could look at it from space if you want to. Let me make sure that I'm spelling this correct. I thought I had spelled that correct. Yeah, Ganetaway. Oh, I put 2 T's in it. Ooh, there are a lot of them. We can play which one is the one cut out of stone. Not you. Let's just go to the one labeled A. Maybe it's the oldest one. Yep, this is going to be it. Because it's under a big old dome. Oh, they don't have pictures. Come on, man. Maybe we can't see it from space. Can we go back in time and see it from space? Hey, we can go back in time and see it from space. It's a bit fuzzy, but this is from 2016. And then they built a roof over it. They've got one from 2017. Oh, that one's actually... they had a roof over it. That's 2012 and 2014. I guess they pulled it down in 2016. And then they put up the new roof in 2018. And it was in 2019, 2020. Yeah. Yep. I love Google Earth, by the way. Am I in space? I'm looking at Google Earth, which is, you know, it's looking at the stuff from space. The puppy is back, and she just pooted, so she's scared right now. It's okay, you big scaredy cat. You just farted. She's afraid of her own butt. And when she farts, she gets freaked out. but I don't know if you heard the like commotion that maybe was just behind me that sounded like furious little puppy feet on a wood floor. That was her as she farted. Anyway, Solomonic dynasty, expanding stuff. They take over Damat. They begin to dominate trade. They're going to continue to patronize the church quite a bit, building really cool churches like that. The rock cut church stuff continues for a while. They're going to be very involved in the communication between themselves and some of these bigger churches. They're going to send letters to patriarchs, the big leaders of the Christian churches in places like Alexandria and Constantinople. They're going to be very involved in trying to make sure that their church leadership is correctly appointed, and they're really about the Christianity stuff. And they're going to be kind of the big Christian power in the region for the next fairly decent period of time. Now, they're not alone, though. And again, as a sign of shifting times, we have the Sultanate of Ifat. And we can see where it's located. Basically right next door to them. So our kingdom of the Solomonic dynasty would have been right around here. And here's the Sultanate of Ifat, which is going to start right around here. And remember, I said that we'd again mention this place that was on the map called Shewa. The Sultanate of Shewa. Okay, well, let me talk about that for just a second. There was this group of people that has been referred to historically as the Sultanate of Shewa. I don't know if they were necessarily a country. I think what they more likely were was a string of fairly well-to-do city-states that were on trade routes and that were along a riverbank. And I think that the reason they're referred to as a sultanate, meaning a single unit, is because they were all Muslims and they all got along, and they recognized that the only way for them to really sustain their existence was to act in unison most of the time, right? So if one of the cities was threatened, all of the cities would show up. This is just me hypothesizing. There are other scholars that want to say, oh, no, it was an established group that had a clear lineage of rulers. I don't think so. That lasted for several hundred years. I don't think so. But we know that there are Muslim people in this region that had been there for quite some time. And this is going to be the beginning of where the Sultanate of Ifat is going to grow. The original territory that was attributed to the Sultanate of Shewa, regardless of whether or not it was a legitimate thing, is going to be where this original group shows. There's a particular group of people that are referred to as the Walashama dynasty, and they're going to be the group that's going to rule for about the next 300 or 400 years. Now, they're going to do the same sort of thing that our people up in the Solomonic dynasty are going to do. The rulers of the Sultanate of Ifat are going to claim that they have lineage that goes back to the family of Muhammad, specifically Muhammad's stepson, or not stepson, his son-in-law, Ali. They're going to claim that they are the descendants of Ali's brother. That gives them this legitimacy that they need to establish themselves as rulers. Of course, there's no way to prove any of this stuff. They had been in this area for a very, very long time, though. This group is some of the, again, the oldest Muslim groups in this area. And inside of their territory are some mosques that were built in like the 700s or 800s, which would make them... well, I don't know, not 700s. Maybe 800s or 900s. I should amend my statement. Which would make them some of the oldest mosques in Africa anywhere. All right, so this place does have a fairly decent established track record of being Muslim for quite some time. But they're going to be important because of the trade thing. Again, you got to have access to the sea. And the region that we're looking at is this river basin right here that runs up into our zone of discussion. and it pops out right here at this little bay. And right here on this coast, there was a really, really big port city called Zila. And I mentioned this back at the beginning of the stream. But this was a really huge port. And they're going to take it over and add that to their territory. And when they do so, that gives them control of this entire river basin, which runs from here in Central Africa all the way out to the ocean. That also puts them closer to India than the Sultanate of Dahlak. And unfortunately for the Sultanate of Dahlak, the Sultanate of Ifat is going to steal a lot of their business, because it's easier to move stuff internally just sort of down here to the river and then from the river out to the sea than it is to hike it all the way across this area to load it up on a ship and send it to the Dahlak archipelago. And the Sultanate of Ifat is going to start undercutting and destroying the monopoly of the Sultanate of Dahlak. This doesn't mean that Dahlak loses all of its money. It just means that now they have competition, and because of the fact that they have more access to Central Asia than Central Africa than the Sultanate of Dahlak does, is going to give them the leg up as well. So the Sultanate of Ifat is going to be very big, very rich, and is going to be very powerful for a few hundred years. They don't last too terribly long, but what they do is important. They offer a very stable and very open Muslim country that is welcoming of Muslim immigrants. And this is going to continue this shift of the region from purely Christian ethnic identities to Muslim ethnic identities. And over the course of the next several hundred years, that's going to be the primary driver of political and military tension in this zone, is Christians versus Muslims who all want to live and all want to make trade. So there's some economics built into it, there's some religion built into it, there's some ethnic identities that are built into it. Obviously governmental styles are a little bit different. But even today, if we, again, go all the way through history and catch up with today, inside of modern Ethiopia, that's still one of the largest problems. If you're familiar with the region here in northern Ethiopia, we can see if we can get states to pop up. All right, so state lines are popping up, but we're not necessarily seeing them. Up here in northern part of Ethiopia, there's a region that's called Tigray. And it had been in basically an open rebellion because they want to leave Ethiopia, because the population of Tigray today is predominantly Muslim, whereas Ethiopia is predominantly Christian. So these tensions that start here in our medieval period in Eastern Africa are ones that are going to carry through all the way till today, even though it's 700, 800 years later. But that is all that I wanted to talk about for the night, but that doesn't mean that we have to go anywhere. Of course, if you all have any questions or if there's anything that you all want to bring up, please let me know. Current Google Map view contains 33.3% of the countries who have citizenship-based taxation. Current Google Map view contains 33% of the countries who have citizenship-based taxation. The others being U.S. and Myanmar. Interesting. So you mean like income tax? Or do you mean like... I mean, I guess income tax would be the only thing. What up, Bits and Bytes? You want to play Worldle? All right, give me just a second. We'll pull up Worldle. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, this game is called Worldle. And what it does is it shows you a country, and then you have to guess what the country is. So here's our country. And it's fairly... I wonder if they did this on purpose because of what today is. But this is the United Kingdom. And we could play the bonus rounds, sure. What? Oh, wow. It's got all of the territories that they're connected to. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to name all of these. All right. That's France. I have no idea what that is. What number 2 is. It's probably some weird islands that are off the coast of France or something. 3 is the Netherlands. I think 4 is the Faroe Islands. I have no idea what 5 is. 6 is Norway. What is 7? I have no idea what 7 is. I know 8 is Ireland. I have no idea what 9 is. Anybody have guesses for these that I've missed? Eritrea is the 3rd, by the way, not Ethiopia. Okay, cool. 7 is Belgium. Yep. I thought that, but I didn't guess it. And see, this is the problem with having, like, empires. These little islands that I'll never be able to figure out. Shouldn't one of these technically be Spain? Is this the other half of Cyprus? Is 5 the other half of Cyprus? No, I don't think so. I mean, I guess I could guess it. It's probably not going to give it to me. Nope. I get 14 guesses, by the way. Bailiwick of Guernsey. That sounds horrible, and I'm going to guess it just to guess it. Hey, holy crap! 2 is the Bailiwick of Guernsey. And I guess that purely because it sounds like something that the British would name, right? Oh, wow. Bouvet Island, British Indian Ocean Territory, British Virgin Islands. Yeah, this is going to take forever. I think I'm going to just give up. Can I say give up? Yes. Jersey and the Isle of Man. Interesting. Okay. Anyway, so Isle of Man and Jersey. I theoretically, I guess I should have known that. Can I guess the capital for the United City? Yeah. London. Can I guess the flag for the UK? Yes. Spoken language. English. Is the other one Scottish Gaelic? No. Is it just Gaelic? No. Okay. What else language are we speaking in England? Welsh? Okay. There we go. How do you say my name is in English? Okay, which one has the most... Okay, that's got to be Welsh just because it looks horrible. I literally guessed this one because it looks like the most confusing thing I could think of. I looked at all the rest of these and I was like, that one looks like it's Welsh. Why? Because the letters don't go together that way. And there we go. What is the estimated population of the UK? That's actually a great question. I don't know this. 80 to 100 million? No, okay, 60 to 80 million. Okay, 67. Okay, okay. Pound. Guess the biggest cities in order. Well, London's number one. Birmingham's probably number two, right? And then it's Leeds and Glasgow. UK people, is this accurate? Or is Glasgow and Leeds flipped? I think it's got to be this way, though, right? Leeds is bigger than Glasgow. I mean, don't look it up, right? I mean, I guess I'll go ahead and guess it. Yeah, okay, I got it right. I'm so horrible with kilometers, I don't even know. I'm just going to guess B, and it was wrong. There we go. So there is Worldle. It's always fun to do that. I'm horrible with like square kilometer stuff. I have no idea what a square kilometer is in relationship to a square mile. I do dig those a lot. Can you guess the length of the coast of the UK? A bajillion kilometers. It's one of the longest coastlines on Earth. I know something like that. It's because it's just the weird islands and all the bays and inlets and stuff. The distance to the moon and back, or some weird thing like that. Like, you can go to the moon 6 times and back, or around Britain once. 2 kilometers. I think it's a bit longer than that. Because like running a 5K is like a little bit more than 2 miles. So that would be like not even a mile, I don't think. Okay. Anybody else got any questions? Got any points of stuff? Ooh, I know one thing that we need to do. When we were on stream on Tuesday, I did not pick a viewer request topic, which was a bad move on my part. So what I need to do is see who is here and pick a new viewer request topic. So, I will read the list, and if you are here, make yourself known. JMR Killer, are you here? Retheus, are you here? What about your birthday / Nepo stream? Oh yeah, do you have something that you want to do for your birthday / Nepo stream? We could totally do that. It'd actually be way easier. Okay, cool. Well, you all don't get to pick because Brittany's going to pick. And Freedom Summer. Oh, cool. That'll be a good one. Yeah. We could totally talk about that. So, the next viewer request that we will do is on the Freedom Summer. It's the 60th anniversary. Oh, cool. I didn't know that. I mean, I knew it, but like I didn't put it together. Maybe we should try to go to the Civil Rights Museum again and maybe do that and finish that before we go, and I can get some pictures or something. We should talk about that. Well, that'll be good. It'll be a really good one. The UK is the typical example of the coastline paradox due to their fractal nature. Fractal Nature sounds like a 9 Inch Nails album. Came out after Steal This Album. No, Steal This Album was System of a Down. Let's see who's streaming. No. Let's do history. Let's see who's streaming. The communist guy streaming again. Actually has more viewers than I do. Nah, I don't really see any of that stuff. Is there anybody doing philosophy? Spanish-speaking person doing philosophy. Well, it's really funny, and you all didn't hear this, but the puppy who is let me see if I can. The puppy has come back into the room and is completely zonked out right here, and is absolutely just snoozing. She just farted in her sleep, and I heard it because it sounded like a fart. But she's not afraid of the farts in her sleep. She's just afraid of the farts while she's awake. Ba-dum-bum. Sounds like Coastline Paradox is an album, is like a lame... no, they wouldn't ever call it Coastline Paradox. Paradox is not a word that Corgan would use. It would be something like Coastline Parasol. Like, if you wanted to make it a 90s or a Pumpkins album, like Parasol would be a word that he would absolutely use. So there's that. All right, we could just see who we're following and just give a raid that way. Who are we following? Let's go follow, go raid my friend Dennis. My friend Dennis does some interesting stuff, historically speaking. He's what you might call like an alternative historian, and this doesn't mean like he's all about aliens and junk like that. He's just very open to humans being older than we think, and he and I overlap a lot, especially on ancient history, and we're both down with scrapping the existing migration models. Matt is Spartacus. There's a puppy head pat that sneaked in there. Matt, thank you so much for being Spartacus. Farts are cries from a captured turd. I remember when my dog would sometimes have really rancid farts while asleep and wake herself up, and she would get annoyed and leave because of the smell. Junk. That's great. That's great. Matt, thank you so much for being Spartacus. Welcome in. I don't know if you've been in for a while. Anyway, we're about to go do a raid. But anyway, Dennis is playing a game called Manor Lords, which is one that I want to play. And he's also watching stuff on YouTube from like down in the corner of his screen. But anyway, Dennis is a cool dude. We get along pretty well. Yeah, we're both academic heretics. That's exactly what we are. So let's go bring some eyeballs over to Dennis, and we'll yell adventure when we get there. If you have any of those lovely adventure hat emotes, you can throw those in chat. Yeah, let's bring some love toward Dennis's way. Thanks for everybody for hanging out on Treason Day. Yep. Thanks for everybody who subscribed. Silver Pills, Matt, Kyle. These are people that help me out. I appreciate that a lot. Also, there are other people that help me out by subscribing and supporting me in other ways. So thanks to all of my patrons on Patreon, and thanks to everyone who has donated books to me via the command books. So thanks to everybody, and let's go show love to Dennis, and I will see everybody next week. So take it easy.